Great, just hit record. And thank you all for being here tonight. Um, we're kind of coming in for a couple of landings. And I think so I want to talk about, we're going to go over Everyday Use today by Alice Walker. And then, excuse me, I'll talk about the fiction essay that we'll be doing a week. I think originally I had it due this Sunday, but I'm going to have it due in a week, next week, Wednesday by midnight, right? Go, okay. So we'll do that. That way we can talk about it today. You can think about it. If you have any questions, we have Monday to ask any questions before you submit it. Also, yes, I'll talk about that process. And so we'll talk about everyday use today. And then if we have time, I will also talk about setting us up for the next section that we're going to do, which is going to be focused on doing a research paper. So we're going to do that. And then, like I think I mentioned last Monday, that we will then cycle back to theater. And then I'm going to have the last couple classes. We do something on slam poetry because I like to wrap that all up together. And then we'll just focus on the final exam. We don't have the text for the final exam, but I'll talk about all that when I get next to the talking about the I'm sorry there. I was distracted by a fly. I have this deal. When a fly comes in the house, I tell the fly, you can live here, right? There's other rooms you to fly in. Whenever I'm in a room, don't come in the room, or else death could be a penalty. So so it's in this room. I'm like, there's a whole other freaking apartment. Go fly over there. Leave me alone. But okay, enough of the fly. So all right, let's just begin with a general discussion of everyday use. We had a long discussion on Monday about the Buddha principle, and we talked a lot about family, and we talked a lot about family dynamics. We talked about family dysfunction in that. Particularly, we spent a little bit of time talking about the two brothers, right? The dynamic between two brothers and the relationship to the mother in that one. And so I thought it would be interesting for us to continue that conversation, but with a different story. So any initial reactions to everyday use? You could say I didn't like it, I liked it, I understood it.
I liked it. At the beginning, I had trouble understanding it. Mm-hmm. But then I was like, I have to do this work. And I started reading it again. And it was touching. It was really touching at the end of the story when she was mentioning that for the first time she gave a hug to her daughter. Yeah. And the meaning of the quilt, it meant heritage, your ancestors, what you bring from the past to now. That's what it meant for me.
Cool. Anybody else reactions? Or you can talk about what the quilt meant. That was the assignment, to talk about what do you think this symbolized in the story.
Yeah, I did like the story. It was really good. I kept thinking about Color Purple. When what's her name, Sugar? She went out and explored the world, and then she came back. Was it Sugar?
No, Sugar was the singer, the comes to town.
Yeah, the singer. But she left and she made something of herself, and then she came back with her husband. So it reminded me of one of the sisters in the story that we just read. And I thought it was interesting, the dynamics between the two sisters. And
so just Adama, we're talking about Everyday Use by Alice Walker.
Yes, Everyday Use. And then also, the story of the quilt and the symbolism of it, the history of how people used to do quilts before, or has to do with, making a quilt out of history. But then, when the daughter, had no interest of it when she went to school, and then all of a sudden she found interest in it. And but that quilt was promised to the other daughter, and that dynamics between the mother and I forgot what her name was, the one that came with the husband.
Her name is either D, is the name that the mother gives her, and then
Yes, and then
yeah.
you know changed her name into a Muslim name, I'm assuming. And but the dynamics of the mother of how she stood her ground and said, no, this is for your sister. This is meant for your sister. You know, she was taught by her grandmother how to knit, and you had no interest in it, and now you have this whole big interest in it, and you want it, and she wants to just like take it. And I thought that was kind of selfish of her. You know, I mean, I understand why she wanted to take it because now she found meaning of what the quilt means, but it was promised to the other sister.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that she didn't take it.
Yes. Well, like the mother didn't let her take it, right?
Yeah, I'm glad that the mother, you know, stood her grounds and said, no, you're not going to take this. This has more symbolism for your other sister because she was taught how to knit by her grandmother who actually did the quilts. So
Cool.
I like that.
Sister, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I don't know if you got my assignment, but I'm at the significance I put it represents like her family history.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like she just didn't want it. It was promised to the little girl, that Maggie. So she was like, oh, why would I get? Like she didn't want her daughter to take it, and plus I didn't like the fact that Dee just flaunted her education onto her family, and I just felt like that was kind of like she didn't have to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and her and Maggie had come from two different they I don't know how to say it, but like they both like I don't like they both opposite from each other, like Maggie's the one that stood in the house, but stood with her family, and she like left and explored the world and then just comes back flaunting it. I just felt like that was like kind of like, I didn't like that part at all.
Yeah, well, anyone else want to share an opinion or share what they thought the significance of the quilt was? You can unmute, you could always put in the chat. Okay. So, oh, yeah, I'm gonna mute it. I don't know. I'm keep muting myself because like the music. But anyway, the yeah, the story, there is that climactic moment, right? The climax of the story when the mother makes that change, right, and gives the takes the quilt from Dee and gives it to Maggie. And if we look at it, it isn't just that Dee went into the world, as Cesar saying, definitely, right? And Gregory said the same thing. Greg said the same thing, that Dee went into the world and had a different experience and is coming back home, right, with all these ideas, right, and this kind of different relationship to her past, to where she comes from, right? And so at the beginning of the story, the whole beginning of the story is really like this exposition, right, of setting up the lawn and the mother and daughter preparing the home and for Dee's arrival, right, and then the mother going into this fantasy world, like she's on that TV show, right, and that kind of like a this is your life, and that she imagines that it's almost like her wish is that Dee would acknowledge and support and love her, but she knows that that's not the kind of person who Dee is. So we learn who Dee is pretty quickly upon her arrival. The minute she arrives, right? Dee's like very different. So talk to me. So one of the things that adds to the conversation, right? Also to this idea of family dynamics is we talked about sibling rivalry, right? That when siblings compete, but there's another aspect of sibling rivalry, which is a term called favoritism. Anybody familiar with that phrase, favoritism? Yes. What is it?
An inclination towards one person or more than the other.
Hmm. Like with kids in particularly, like you've got a favorite child, and
When
most
you
mothers
favor
would be
one
like,
from the other.
say it again.
When you favor one from the other.
Yeah. Right. And isn't there its own parents say, I love all my children equally, right? If you have more than one kid, those of us who have been in families know that that's probably not true, right? And it's, for whatever reasons, sometimes in the case of, the Buddha principle, we gave a lot of reasons why the mother, right? The fear of losing the child, the fact that he had leukemia, the fact that she had miscarriages and finally had a baby. So there's all these reasons why, but it's interesting to look at this story in terms of favoritism and how the mother makes a switch, right? She goes from, and Dee didn't just go into the world. That was something systematic, right? The family.
But
Go ahead.
sorry, Professor, but the mother describes Dee being more beautiful in a way, better hair, better body, being able to read better. You cannot hear me?
No, better. Her skin is lighter.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes. So like it describes how much she's able to read. It's like the other one, it's not really able to read as fluent as Dee. Maggie is not able to read as fluent as Dee. So yes, she highlights all these things that she considers for Dee to be better.
So it also kind of opens up a question, right? With this, like this is a Black family, and they're all Black children, right? And how these ideas, right, of the expectation of, right, or the definition, the social definition of beauty, right? That she's slimmer, that she is lighter skin, that she is nicer hair, that she gets educated, right? And so ever since she was little, I love the scene. We'll get to a minute if we can read, because I want to also get to the PowerPoint. The scene, well, we don't have to read it, but there's that moment where, before I go to that, so talk to me about Maggie. What's up with Maggie? The character of Maggie, the sister, right? We just spoke about Dee, that she's educated, that she's, more worldly, that she left to go to college, that she, is slimmer, has a better body, that the mother has given her all of these things throughout her life, right? And so what about Maggie? Let's talk about Maggie. We mentioned that she's able to do quilting, right? I mean, I think that's what Greg or someone else said, that she's has the capacity she learned that skill, right? She's taken on that family tradition of being able to quilt. But what else do we know about Maggie?
Well, she's the opposite. She's more heavy. She's dark skinned. She's great, in the farm, I think, working in the field and stuff like that. And I also think that she has a learning disorder.
Okay.
There was a word there that she used when she actually spoke that made me think that she had a learning disorder.
Right.
And very quiet. She didn't express emotions. She was very shy.
Yes.
Yeah, she was very
like chronically shy, right?
Yeah.
At the beginning of the book, with the story, she doesn't even talk. She's even hiding. I mean, the mother said the description of her that the mother does, Alice Walker, but the way the mother describes her, remember, as like a wounded animal at some point,
Yes.
right? So the way in which the mother sees the daughters, her view of them is also very different. But Maggie, one important thing else about Maggie that informs who Maggie's character is. Do any of you know what I'm thinking about?
The maid doing the dishes and stuff like that.
Well,
specifically to Maggie,
specifically to Maggie, is that she's burned, right? So in a sense, Maggie is disfigured because there was a fire when they were younger, right? And the mother rescues Maggie from the house, and that idea of rescuing her and her dress burned on her skin, and her having a large percentage of her body scarred. So in a way, Maggie is disfigured. So this whole shyness, this whole retreat from society, this whole shame about the way she looks is also another aspect of who that character is. And in a way, she's the one that stays with the mother, right? The mother hopes to marry her off to some guy in the neighborhood, in the town, right?
Yeah, but the way they described the guy that she was gonna be married to, it was
Yeah,
disgusting.
right. Like who would want to marry him? But somebody who's who can't get married to anybody else, and so she's
Yeah.
gonna put up with that kind of thing. So there's all these values, these social values that are in there, these societal values, these that come in there, and then Dee shows up, right, with all of her culture and all of her education, and she's treating her family like there's these sweet little things, these relatives that like she's not from that house, right? She pretends like she's not from there, that she and Maggie grew up side by side. And it was the efforts of the mother and the neighborhood and the church that raised money and sent her away to school, right? So everybody was in the part of the plan of the scheme so that Dee could have the advantages and succeed, and Maggie would, continue the cycle and live at home and be with the mother and marry some local guy that she probably doesn't even love. And and so this whole kind of division, but in a sense, there is this sense of with this story that the Pura principle didn't have, right? This sense of hope, right? That moment when the mother takes the quilts from Dee and gives them to Maggie. And what do you think motivated the mother to do that?
I think what motivated her to do that, because I think in the beginning she was looking forward to seeing her daughter. I don't think she had any resentment of her daughter going out and, making something out of herself. But when Dee came back and all of a sudden she changed her name, which her name was given, there was a purpose and a reason why she was given. It was her sister. It was the mother's sister who gave, that was the name that she gave her. And all of a sudden, she came back like with this whole different culture. And then the mother just completely switched. Like she didn't know who her daughter was. Here you are demanding and questioning, I think. And then there was a part in the story where she told her mom that she doesn't know her heritage.
The mother.
Yeah. Dee told that about her mother.
Right.
Like, I want to take this, I think, I could be wrong, but I'm bad with paraphrasing. But I think she was saying, well, you have no use of the quilt because you don't know what heritage is and you don't know the value of it. I do. I want to hang up this quilt, and she was just going on and on and on. Like, and at one point she didn't even care about the quilt when she went over to college. She didn't even want it.
Right. She didn't want it. So it's interesting you make that point
Yeah.
about her. Oh, Johanna, you have your hand up. Okay.
I from the beginning of the story, I started studying like the way that she was staring at the fire of the house. And it was like a message that for me, the author was giving with that image of her staring at the ashes. Should I make a dance? The mom said. It was like she was a person without emotions, I would say, given the situation. And also Dee didn't appreciate much of heritage when it came to what Gregory mentioned about her going away to college and offering, and she thought that it was like old fashioned and stuff for her to take that. It was like she was kind of ashamed of who she was and where she came from, and so many other traits that it was in the story. It was with the house, the way the house looked, and how she would mention about not coming back. If she would come back, but without friends. Like she was ashamed of who she was.
Well, I want to respond both to you and to Gregory. I mean, the comment that Gregory made in terms of that she wanted to put it up on the wall, right? So her relationship to that quilt was that this artifact, this thing that she was going to hang up and and look from afar, and she complains that she goes, Maggie would probably put it to everyday use, which is the title of the piece. And that means that it would be part of her everyday, it would be incorporated into her life, right? Not this thing that she would put up on the wall. And so the mother then takes it and says, you know, because Maggie could use it, it can get messed up, and Maggie would know how to fix it, right? And restore it and create it, right? And this idea is powerful that you're talking about, Johanny, that she's raising, because I think, you know, the idea of being ashamed, right, of where she comes from, being ashamed of her mother, right, being ashamed of you know, like her beginnings, right, and one of the things I love about this story and reading this story is because I think, you know, that was the whole mother's point, right? The whole effort was so that Dee would become smarter and stronger and have a better life than the life that she has, and then instead of appreciation coming to her is this devaluing of where you come from, right? And I think it's something all of us, I'm sure all of us who, you know, have parents or have somebody that pushed us, you know, that's their dream for us. And I'm sure those of you who have children, your dreams for those children to have more education, a better life, a better everything that you have. And then how do you, as the generation that got pushed by the one before you, how are you received by the generation you're pushing, right? To do better. How are we reciprocating all of that, right? So it's an interesting theme and idea inside of this story.
And also, Professor, I'm sorry,
Yes,
the quilt was an important piece as for the mom, and it showed when it was showing the items around the house that she carried, like the bench and all these other artifacts that she had from her ancestries. So yeah, she didn't appreciate any of it.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna just jump through the story a little bit, just because I want to bring some text in, and then, you know, as with the other stories, I have a PowerPoint I want to share that I'll post. So just so you all know too, up until whatever Monday, all the classes have been uploaded, and all the PowerPoints that relate to the stories have been uploaded. So everything's up to date. I was trying to work to get everything up to date before today, and I'll put today's stuff up on there too, so that you have everything you need to work on the essays, the fiction essays. Did I freeze? No, okay, good. Because my internet has been like crazy all day today. I've had to sometimes even have my camera off in some meetings because the things, you know, I was worried about tonight, but it seems to be working. All right, so I want to look at the text a little bit. So we can just see, oh, let me share my screen. Okay, so here's the text, and it's written by Alice Walker. And so I think Gregory kept saying he kept thinking about The Color Purple because she wrote The Color Purple. And so a lot of her, you know, her characters may have relationships to each other in terms of like who they are and where they come from and the settings and stuff like that. So there is a relationship to them in that way. As we know, Alice Walker, not only did she write The Color Purple, she wrote many other works. The Color Purple is probably her most famous work because it was, you know, won Pulitzer Prize, which is a big literary prize, but it comes with a lot of money. She also, it was made into a movie with Whoopi Goldberg, and it was on Broadway as a show. So it's had a lot of different kind of lives. So that's Alice Walker in a very quick nutshell. So in the beginning, you could see the story starts in first person. So it's the mother telling the story. And she goes, I will wait for her in the yard that Maggie and I made so clean and wavy yesterday afternoon. Our yard like this is more comfortable than most people know. It is not just a yard. It is like an extended living room. When the hard clay is swept clean as a floor and the fine sand around the edges lined with tiny irregular grooves, anyone can come and sit and look up into the elm tree and wait for the breezes that never come inside the house. So she begins with a setting of place, right? And that's one of the issues that comes up in this story, right? That the place from which Dee comes from is a conflict for her, right? It's a place that she doesn't really own, or she wants to own in this kind of distant way. Then she goes up, and then she goes right into the characterization. Maggie will be nervous until after her sister goes. She will stand hopelessly in corners, homely and ashamed of the burn scars down her arms and legs, eyeing her sister with a mix of envy and awe. She thinks her sister has held life always in the palm of one hand, that no is a word the world never learned to say to her, right? Never learned to say to Dee, right? So she gives us characterization immediately, and she gives us the setting right away. You start understanding the beginning of there's going to be a conflict between these two sisters, right? Because she sees her with envy and with awe, right? And then she goes into the fantasy about the TV show, and she talks about Dee. She describes herself. She gives direct representation of who she is as a character. In real life, I am a large, bug-boned woman with rough man-working hands. In the winter, I wear flannel nightgowns to bed and overalls during the day. I can kill and clean a hog as mercilessly as a man. My fat keeps me hot in zero weather. I can work outside all day, breaking ice to get water for washing. I can eat pork liver cooked over the open fire minutes after it comes steaming from the hog. One winter, I knocked the bull calf straight in the brain between the eyes with a sledgehammer, and had the meat hung up to chill before night fell, right? But so she talks about who she is, and this mother is just like, she is not this quiet little mother in a country house. She's like, she's tough, she's strong, she can kill a calf, she can kill a pig and hang the meat, and she's completely self-sufficient, right? But she does that characterization because she says that's not the kind of mother that she thinks Dee wants. Dee wants one that is, that's different, and she talks about that later on. Then here's a characterization of Dee, right? Dee is lighter than Maggie, with nicer hair and a fuller figure. She's a woman now, though sometimes I forget. How long ago was it that the other house burned? 10, 12 years? Sometimes I can still hear the flames and feel Maggie's arms sticking to me, her hair smoking and her dress falling off her little black papery flakes. Her eyes seemed stretched open, blazed open by the flames reflected in them. And Dee? I see her standing off under the sweet gum tree she used to dig gum out of, a look of concentration on her face as she watched the last dingy gray board of the house fall inward and the red-hot brick chimney. Why don't you do a dance around the ashes? I wanted to ask her. She hated that house that much, right? So there's even later on, she talks about like maybe Dee even set that fire because she didn't want to be in that house. And as a result, her sister almost died in it. But and she says, she goes on, I never had an education, don't ask me why. In 1927, colored ask fewer questions than they do now. So it gives you a little bit of sense of time, right? If the mother was a child or young in 1927, and she's probably like maybe in her 40s or 50s now. So we're probably in maybe the 60s, right? We're in the 60s, 70s now. And you can get a sense of that too, because this idea of not only Muslim culture, but also an embracing of African culture is something that happened in the 60s and in the 70s with many African Americans. There was this idea of embracing and connecting more directly to Mother Africa, right? To their origins, right? To not only be kind of damaged or scarred by slavery, but to also say, let's even circumvent that and let's go to the beginning. So a lot of young people, college students, and I always think, when I think about all of the big movements like the Young Lords, and I think of the Harlem Renaissance and all those movements, these people that were doing it, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Thurston, they were 20 years old. They were 21, 22 years old when they were beginning and doing all these movements. So young people lead, always in this country, in many countries, in terms of movements and change, is done by young people. Older people, and then they become older people and they hopefully continue to change. But a lot of that initial spark, young people. So y'all got it going on. So then it continues. Dee arrives. They kind of have dinner together, and then there's the whole quilt thing that goes on with the two of them. The mother, also the cultural disconnect when Hakima Barber, which is the name he's given himself, and does gives her the greeting, assalamu alaikum. The mother first thinks that's his name, right? She's like, us what? But and then she calls him that, that's his face, but in the story as the narrator. And then we talked about the climax, but I wanted to read some of those things, those little passages, so we can see some of the text, some of the ways that Alice Walker was telling the story, the perspective, point of view. the imagery, that little section I read about like her carrying her daughter in her arms, sticking to her eyes open wide, the dress falling off like black peppery flakes. I mean, creates this whole, horrible thing, but there's almost a beauty to it. And then Dee standing there staring at the house, watching the last thing fall down. It's like she wanted to make sure that house was gone. And then there's I'm now toward the last page at the last paragraph here. For some reason, I know why it's not highlighting, because I'm not in Adobe. She goes, when I looked at her, let me go back. I looked at her hard. She had filled her bottom lip with checkerberry. Well, let me just see. Let's go to the top of the page. D. Wanjero looked at me with hatred. You just will not understand the point in these quilts. Well, I said, stumped. What would you do with them? Hang them, she said, as if the only thing you could do with quilts. Maggie by now was standing in the door. I could almost hear the sound of her feet mate as they scraped over each other. She can have them, Mama, she said. Like somebody used to never, oh, hold on a second. This is Maggie talking. Like she can have them, Mama, she said, like somebody used to never winning anything or having anything reserved for her. I can remember Grandma D without the quilts. I looked at her hard. She had filled her bottom lip with checkerberry stuff, and it gave her face a kind of dopey hangdog look. It was Grandma D and Big D who taught her how to quilt herself. She stood there with her scarred hands hidden in the folds of her skirt. She looked at her sister with something like fear, but she wasn't mad at her. This was Maggie's portion. This was the way she knew God to work. When I looked at her like that, something hit me at the top of my head, and I ran down to the soles of my feet, just like when I'm in church and the Spirit of God touches me and I get happy and I shout. And I did something I had never done before. I hugged Maggie to me, then dragged her into the room, snatched the quilts out of Miss Wanjero's hands and dumped them into Maggie's lap. Maggie just sat there on my bed with her mouth open. Right? Right? So that moment when she just there's all this characterization, there's all this talk, there's all this action, there's all this reflection the mother's doing. And when she talks about Maggie in that way, she realizes the value of Maggie, like who Maggie is, right? That maybe part of the way Maggie is that way because nobody really helped her, nobody gave her a chance. And who of all should be in that position? The mother, right? That she should be in that position. And so she has a chance to redeem herself and her daughter, and she gives her the quilts, right? And then of course Dee storms off and she's like, I don't know, Maggie, you should get out of this house, blah, blah, all kinds of stuff, but she goes off into the night. So while we're here, I'm gonna go into, any comments? You can comment.
I have a question that about the numbers. Why is I don't know, can I say paragraphs? Because I mean, some of them are just one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to know, because I know like in poetry, those are what? Refresh my memory, stanzas or
Paragraphs would be stanzas, right? It would be stanzas.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad I got that one.
It's to use as reference, isn't it, Professor? Like if you
wanted
to...
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why the paragraphs are all numbered, because each paragraph has a number on it. We haven't talked about MLA and text citation. We're going to talk about that in the next section with the research paper. But because in a short story, you wouldn't reference the paragraph, you would reference the page. Right? So I'm not quite sure why that's there. It could be, I mean, this is old. I mean, not in terms of old, but it's an older copy from another thing. So one of the things that's crazy with MLA is that it constantly changes. So it could be this version is from a time when you had to name the paragraph it was in, not just the page. So that's a possibility, but I'm actually not sure why each paragraph is numbered. But yeah, you're right, Johanni's probably so some kind of reference, but when we do our fiction paper, I mean our research papers and stuff like that with short stories, with articles, you always refer to the page number that's listed. So I'm gonna pop over to this. So we have, here we go. And I spoke about Alice. Well, I'm gonna make this small so that, move this up here. So Alice Walker, we see her, talks a little bit about her. She was born in Georgia in 1944. Up here, in addition to, she won the Pulitzer Prize, and like I mentioned about the Color Purple already, and she's been translated into many languages. So she's read all around the world, right? And she's won a bunch of awards, like lots of book awards. The synopsis, we met Mama, right? The first person narrator describes her relationship to her daughter, Dee, as Dee, an educated young African-American woman who returns to visit her childhood house in the Deep South, right? The story begins as Mama and Maggie, Dee's sisters, Mama's younger daughter, prepares for the visit. And then at last, Dee and her partner, Hakima Baba, show up, and we talked about the other plot lines. But this little section has the kind of plot and the synopsis of the short story. The setting, right? The rural South, specifically Georgia, indicated by the fact that Dee goes to school in Augusta. So sometimes you can find out exactly, they don't tell you I'm here, but they all make references to things, and then you can infer, so well, the Augusta's in Georgia. There could be other Augustus, but the most famous one in the US is in Georgia. The main setting takes place in the yard in the house, right? And the story set in the 60s or 70s, and I just said the math a little bit. So we could tell both by the way Dee and Wanjero are behaving and the things they've taken on. And also the mother says her age. And if you figure Dee's got to be like, she's done with college, she's got to be like in her early 20s at the youngest, right? And so if the mother was in her 20s, right? You can kind of keep doing the math from there. And she's actually a little older because Maggie's already of older marrying age. So and it was here's a Civil Rights Act was in 1964. And I just give you a little cultural context to what's happening around the time. And there was a greater sense of, of Black people in America owning who they were and owning their histories. The characters we meet are Mama, Maggie, Dee / Wanjero, and Hakima Baba. And I spoke a little bit about the characters, right? We read about the mother, how she describes herself, that she's a hard worker. She doesn't have a lot of education, but she has great family values and tradition. Maggie, who is shy, like almost chronically shy, but also is also symbolic of the family and the traditions, because she has the skill to quilt. And Dee, we talked a lot about Dee. Hakima Baba, we haven't talked too much. There's not a lot of information on him in there, but there's enough. We get to know that he is also educated, that he's embracing his Blackness, his, in terms of, it could be Muslim or it could be, I'm forgetting it right now, that was popular. I was a child in the 70s, so I remember the young men who were Muslim. Oh my God, 5%. I think they were calling themselves 5%, something like that.
Not the Black Panther, right? No.
Yeah, no, not a Black Panther. They were like the 5%. It was like a religious kind of embracing that that was going on. So the symbolism, I gave you one is the quilt. That's like a big symbol in it. The house is also a symbol. The yard's a symbol. The mother talks about it, like the place where you come and you sit. The story is bookended by the yard, right? At the beginning of the story, how the mother is preparing it for Dee. And at the end of the story, Dee's gone in a huff, and the mother just sits there with Maggie and enjoys the peace now that Dee is gone, and the kind of readjustment of their lives and of Maggie's value in it.
Yeah, Professor, in regards to the scene, I was also thinking, because when I was reading how she was describing the yard, I wanted to like kind of see where they're at. But then when it says sand, so I thought
clay.
Well, we did, huh?
So I think it's that clay.
Oh, clay?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So it's like, yeah, what were you thinking about sand anyway? Because I think there might be a connection.
Well, I was thinking that they were near water.
Oh, okay, yeah. I don't know if they're near water, but
yeah.
But
And
clay, you know, it's just really rich soil. Sometimes really rich soil is called clay, right? And some soil, they call it red clay. It's like a just a
yeah.
kind of
Mhm.
burnt. Okay.
Mhm.
So
Thank
these are some of the responses before by noon that I was more of you responded afterward is that there I have literally been in meetings since 1:30. I've been sitting in this chair. I got up to eat right before so that I wouldn't faint in the middle of your class. But I went and ate something really quickly and so that I have energy for this class. But otherwise I've been sitting here from meeting to meeting. So before noon, that's why I said by noon, because I knew that by then I'd be swallowed into meetings. So I was able to pull some of your responses, and we can talk more if anybody has something to add. But in the story Everyday Use by Alice Walker, this is what one of you wrote, the quote symbolizes and shows the value of African American culture. Someone else wrote, Dee's lack of understanding that the quilt symbolized that. Her lack of understanding of the significance of her history and heritage brings in the differences in generations, right? The quilt in the story represents African-American women's history specifically, right? Because it is about culture, but this a specific one is about women's history and the history of quilting, right? And their resourcefulness. The quilt is a symbol of art that is passed from generation to generation, passing on history of each generation. And this quilt in particular, right, she literally described pieces of fabric from dresses and even the uniform from a relative that fought in the Civil War. Another point, in Everyday Use by Alice Walker, the quilt symbolizes for the mother, a souvenir, remembrance, affection, being passed down, the next bullet, through generations. The quilt also symbolizes culture. Towards the end of the story, the quilt also symbolizes victory for Maggie. I thought that was an interesting observation. It is. It's a symbol of, of Maggie's victory, right? The prize that Maggie gets for being a good daughter and being able to pass on the family's traditions. Alice Walker's Everyday Use symbolizes the relationship and the legacy of women who have lived in different generations. This is interesting. What I like about the different responses is that it looks at maybe something that we could all say family tradition, and what it does is it expands it, right? It makes it, more specific. The different ways in which, right? Because I think that's heritage is big, like family heritage, cultural heritage, but you could look at it specifically because it did include the whole family when you talk about the individual pieces of fabric that are in it. But then it really was this practice that was passed down from grandmother to daughter, right? This passed down from women to women to women. I wonder if I'm sure in every generation there's probably Mendika quilt too, but like we're talking about the women here. And then it said in the story Everyday Use, the quilt represents living history or family heritage. The student used the word modernity. This also seemed to impact heritage. And I thought that was very interesting. Wanted to unpack some of that. So this is what I got on the chat. I mean, not in the chat, in Blackboard before noon. So if some of you have anything that you wanted to add, let me know. Do you felt like everyone covered it, or there's some things that, right? Well, I mean, I loved all of these, and I love that the one about that the idea that it's a symbol of victory for Maggie, and that where's the other one? Yeah, I thought that I read something about. Sorry about that. I said suddenly you just all dropped out, you disappeared. So let me just go back to sharing screen. Let me actually, yes, let me just leave it there. So some of the themes in the piece are family, cultural heritage. These are big themes, right? Sacrifice is another theme, right? The mother's sacrifice, right? Maggie's sacrifice, racial oppression is a theme that's in it. There's a line that the mother talks about that when she grew up, you didn't look at white people in the eye. There's a line in there, if you remember, right? And so to talk about that, the mother grew up with that kind of situation, and how Dee is totally different, right? Dee is like, what is it? the
She
hope.
makes a comparison there that Dee will look at people in the eye, she says.
Right. And if you remember the Maya Angelou poem, Still I Rise, she goes, I am the hope and the dream of the slave. So in a way, Dee's the hope and the dream of the generation of oppression, right? That she gets to look white people in the eye and give the kind of life that they didn't have the opportunity. Education is a theme, right? The power to advance, right? Education, but also the power to divide, right? So that's something for all of you as you continue to become more and more educated to understand that it has the power to advance, but it can also have the power to divide, right? So that as you make our decisions, and then the social and economic conditions of the characters' daily lives, like how they live day to day. I think, it's, you can tell me to shut up because I just feel like it's just a theme that I think personally it resonates with me. The idea of education advancing and dividing, right? And it's something that I had to grapple with myself when I went to college, and suddenly, I'm from the Bronx. My mom's working class. She only went to 10th grade. My sisters are much younger than me, 10 and 13 years younger. So imagine me on campus. I went away to school in Long Island. There I am, 18 years old, and my sisters are 8 and 5, right? So there's these little kids, and one day they were having a good time and running around and climbing trees. And a classmate of mine, after my family left, she goes, "Was that your family?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Don't they know how to act? This is not a park." And I'm glad that Johanny gave that ill, right? I wish that was my first reaction. I would tell her to go screw herself. But for a minute, I felt ashamed that my family didn't know how to behave. All right. And again, my story is not that story as much, but my story is that story, right? Like my family didn't have money for things. And the way I got things in college is because they got together and did a collection, right? And they did a lot of work to get me to where I needed to be. And so I had to learn that, like, wow, I have to appreciate the sacrifice they make for me, right? And not look at them and not see them the way she sees them, right? But to see them the way I see them, the way I know who they are. And so Dee has that, right? Dee's not seeing her family the way her family sees themselves. She's seeing them from this other perspective, this devalued perspective. So anyway, I went back to education. So I'm going to share, and I hope my thing doesn't dry. So just, curious, because I think a lot of times we imagine what stories look like. And so there was a film made of it. And so I have just a little clip of it. And I thought it would be fun for us to just see a clip and see how, because when you read a story, right, you imagine it in your head, right? You're hearing the characters speak, you're seeing what the setting looks like, and then somebody makes a movie, and then sometimes that it matches it, or sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to show you this. I have it queued up somewhere else that I have to.
Yeah, I never heard of this movie actually.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's see, make sure my volume is up. And you hear it? Well, there's no sound yet. Do you hear the music? Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, my brother and sister.
Don't get up, Mama. All right. If this isn't a shock. Smile, Mama. Smile. And you too, Maggie. Get closer in together. Maggie, give us another expression. And And I want another one with the house behind. Okay. Yes, that's and another. Oh my gosh. I guess that's enough. Never have too many pictures. Don't get up, Mama.
My D.
No, Mama, not deep. Mangiero l'unica che mangio.
What? Well, what happened to D?
She's dead. I couldn't bear it any longer, being named after the people who oppress me.
Now, you know as well as I do you was named after Aunt Dixie.
Aunt Dixie. Aunt Dixie, yes, but who was she named after?
After Grandma D.
And who was she named after?
After her mother. Now, that's as far back as I can trace it. Well, there you are then. There I was not before Dixie cropped up in our family. So why should I trace it back any farther than that?
Oh, I forgot to introduce you. Mama, Maggie.
Assalamu alaikum. That's too hard to pronounce.
No, Mama, that's not his name. It's a greeting.
A greeting? Oh, that's just like the people down the road say. Down the road? Our neighbors, they cattle people. When they greet you, they don't even shake your hand. Well, farming and raising cattle ain't my style, but you can call me Hakeem, our barber. What? Hakeem, our barber. Barber. How do you say your name, baby?
Wanjero.
Wanjiro?
Wanjero.
Uh-huh.
It's a little awkward at first.
I see. Well, welcome to our house, Mr. Barber. One of y'all help me out. I cook supper, and there's lots of stuff, lots of good things.
Where are you? I lost you. What do you all think, seeing some of the characters and the interaction?
Exactly how I visualized it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly how I visualized it. But it was so great to actually see it. I really have to see the movie. The mother,
Thanks, Jacqueline.
yeah, she is just like, you know, yeah. I mean, when I was reading it, I was laughing because I was visualizing a mother like, what? Barber? Are you a barber? But I didn't even want to ask if you're a barber or not. So let me not even ask when it says it in the story. So yeah.
Oh, anybody else?
How the mother's reaction was when she changed her name.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear the character speak it, right? She just delivered it so matter of fact. Like, where did that come from? From your mother, from this, from your aunt, from your like what's the big, kind of like, but that's like an honor, right? To be named after somebody, right? And to be, and so she wasn't taking that. Pardon? Yeah. Were you going to share something, Pardon?
I think the mother, she had like sometimes like our mothers from the village. When you raise your kid and then they go to the city and they come back, yeah, she have like those reaction, like they are so different,
right?
So their kid, like they don't wanna go near them because they know they come from the city, but they don't have to feel that way because no matter what they become, you are the mother, you raise them too.
Mm-hmm.
to
Say
become
it.
better person than you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right? It's such a story, right? That goes that,
Yeah.
that you try to, the parents, the mothers, I was saying particularly, we're talking about mothers, work really hard, sacrifice themselves,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
For their kids to be better and to have a
Yeah.
better opportunity. And then sometimes the kids are not as appreciative, right?
Yes.
And it's like that saying, never forget where you're from,
Right.
you know?
Why do you
That's
think that's, yeah, what do you think that's so important? And can you hold your thought for a second? Johnny, you're going to forget it? No, okay. Why do you think
you.
that's so important?
Because exactly what you said, which I wrote it down because it's very powerful what you said, power to advance and divide.
Mhm.
It just resonated with me with people that I even know, how, it's great to have that advantage of going to college or getting a scholarship, and advancing, especially if you're coming from the ghetto, but also there's this division when they come back and they try to educate the family.
Right.
Like the family doesn't have any history, or it's like, you know, yes, we're poor, but look at how we survived. That's the importance, you know.
Mhm.
This is why you went off to college.
Mhm.
So they forget. They
Yeah.
forget where they come from. And there's history, and there's history in being poor. To me, I think there's a lot of history in being poor.
Yes.
Mhm.
Johnny you remember your thought?
Yeah, it's funny how the mother was having trouble pronouncing the name. Every time I had to name one of my kids, I have 3.
Mhm.
I thought about the name so much because I thought, how will my mom pronounce the name? So I always try to choose something that my family will be able to pronounce.
Mhm.
So
Sweet.
I guess my heritage was important when it came to that. That's what I mean.
I
Yeah.
was I was thinking about how my mother would have reacted if one of my sisters came with one of those names. Oh my God. Ooh, Spanish mom. Ooh.
So
Yeah.
you pick up the name that are easy to pronounce, so
Mhm.
they can get them easily.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot with this particular story. I mean, and a lot of the stories that we've read in the class throughout the semester, the last couple of weeks. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the fiction essay. And so it's your next essay. We've talked about it a little bit before. I'm going to share my screen again and open up. Um, where's Blackboard is here. And so a couple things. We're going to go to discussions, and it's the second thing. Oh yeah, I see many more of you posted in the for everyday use. But so here, the difference is we're going to also submit this paper through Turnitin. We're going to use Turnitin for the rest of the papers in the semester. The very first paper, your poetry essay and your revision, I will, do a lot of deeper edits on it. Turnitin is a kind of an app or program. You upload your papers. It does some editing for me, but I do some editing as well, and I do some fixing on it. But I also comment the way I comment on your paper, so I'll give you some instruction with that. But I'll share more about that, how to submit it another time. But I want to let you know that I'm using Turnitin. It's going to be due November 10th now instead of November 7th by 11:59. And you could select one essay option to fulfill the assignment, right? So option 1, I want to show is here, right? And it's basically like the poetry one, right? You're going to be asked to select one or many stories and in class from the short story collection and from the folder rather. And then you're going to write an essay that identifies, let me just highlight it as I read it. Then the student shall write an essay that identifies and illustrates the elements of fiction explored in our classes and readings, including character analysis, setting, theme, symbolism, imagery, metaphor, similes, dramatic structure, plot, among others. So these are some of the ways we've talked about fiction. So that's, I'm going to come into the class and I'll share the screen again. So one thing is like what we've been talking about. You could pick a story and focus on one story and write about the dramatic structure. You can write about symbolism in the story. You could do, you can take maybe perhaps if you want to look at the, setting and how important the setting is for different stories, you can pick 3 stories and talk about the setting in 3 different stories. So that's one way you could look at, you could respond to it, which is similar to the poetry, which was like just pick any poem or poems and speak about poetic elements inside of them, right? And you create a thesis statement that says, I will examine symbolism in these stories. I will examine, the way in which the climax and dramatic structure works in the story, and then you will explain that in your essay. So I'm going to share my screen again, and then I give you some suggestions, right? Or you can come up with your own, or here's some based on the assignments you've done. An option, you can pick one of these. Discuss the symbolism of the arm in the short story Forgiveness by Rebecca Brown, right? Discuss at least 3 themes in the short story The Judge's Wife. Execute a character analysis of 3 principal characters in the short story Cathedral, right, by Raymond Carver. Execute a character analysis of at least 3 characters from the short story The Pura Principle by Junot Diaz. Discuss the significance of the symbols of the cathedral in Cathedral by Raymond Carver, the arm in Forgiveness by Rebecca Brown, and the quilt in Everyday Use by Alice Walker. Or write an essay that discusses and demonstrates your understanding of how Junot Diaz uses sex, curse words, Ross Street language to produce the shock of representation in the short story Alma. So these are examples built that you can build your essay responding to any one of these prompts. And many of them are built out of the assignments you've had to do as they pertain to each story. So if you're having trouble saying, what do? You can look at one of those and pick one of those. Maybe if one of those resonates with you and use one of those as what you respond to. Or you could do it, whatever. Let's say you love sticks and you want to write about sticks. Or if you want to switch something else out, what we've done, we could do that as well. And then you would do I'll go back to share my screen again to the instructions here. And then the second part is to write a well-organized, well-developed, correct essay that's at least 3 pages, but not more than 5, okay? Formatted in MLA, which means the 1-inch margin, double-spaced. The typeface should be Times Roman or Arial at 12 point. The first page is set up to include your name, my name, the class section, the date in that order in the upper left-hand margin. Each page is numbered with the header. Example, like I just put my last name, put your last name on page 1, and the essay should have a title. And I say, here's the handout, but I have to attach it and attach properly. And then it's due by Wednesday, November 10th, and uploaded to TurnIt on Blackboard. So those are the instructions for the essay. I'm going to pause to see if there's any questions or any comments.
Professor, what is TurnIt? TurnIt.
All right. So I'll show that in a minute as well. So I'll show you that. Any other questions? All right. So let me tell you. So TurnIt is an app, or it's a program. It's in Blackboard. That's where you upload your papers. And so this paper, your theater paper, and your research paper will all be on TurnIt. I'm not sure about the final exam. I have to see. They may sometimes use a different one. Sometimes they use Safe Assign or they use one of the two. So in addition to it doing grammatical errors and checking things for me, I always have to check it because it's a machine that does it. And sometimes, like for instance, it'll tell me your name is misspelled, but I know your name's not misspelled, so I'll fix that. But I think one of the big things that's important with TurnIt, and it gives me a quick opportunity to talk about plagiarism, is that plagiarism is when you copy someone else's work, or if you there's a lot of information on the internet, and that information is there for you as a resource, but you should be able to either, if you're using direct information, to credit it, and that's what we do with MLA and text citation, and we'll talk about that starting next week when we start talking about the research paper. So it's not that you can't use another piece of text, is that you should use what you need and you should give it credit, right? That's the main thing with plagiarism. And so Turnitin is designed for that. I'm sure there are students that have outsmarted Turnitin, but that's the point of Turnitin as well. There's another function of Turnitin. It checks for plagiarism, and so it'll list that up. Now, sometimes it says things are plagiarized. Sometimes you quote, use a quote from the story, and it flags it. But of course, if you say in the story he says quote blah blah blah, then of course that gets that doesn't do it. But and let me, in the minutes that are left, let me show you where that is. So whenever you're ready next week to upload your paper, you're going to go to the course content, and then you'll see this little window here. That's where you would turn it in. And I'm going to click it here. So you would click it. And then once you click it, you click here, your name will pop up. As you can see, some of you are there. And if not, you could type your name in there.
My name.
Yeah, and then you just put here. You just put fiction essay, or you can give it, studying symbolism and forgiveness, and then wherever it is, you upload it. So I think so that's how it looks, and turn it in, and you just upload it there, and it gives you a message. But I will say that the two formats it accepts are Word and a PDF. Those are the two ways you can upload it. So I don't know if it was this class that we went into Google Docs. Because if you go into Google Docs as a way to save it as, you could save it or download it as a Word document or a PDF. So you have to, if you're working in Google Docs, you just got to save it in that format, and then upload it in that format. Other questions? All right, so then technically you don't have, the only homework I'm going to tell you is for you to read. There's a handout on the research paper. Let me show it to you. So, and then we'll be done. So in course content, I've put in the section on the research paper. So I'm just going to have you read this research paper packet, Fall Spring 21. So just read this. I think it's about 3 pages. And this is just going to talk about the the first 3 pages, right? That's what you have to read. 1, 2, and 3. That's it. There's more to it. We'll go over all of this stuff next week over the next couple of classes. But for next class, you don't have any homework, but to think about what fiction paper you're going to write. And if you want to get started on it, you've got a week to do it. And just read that handout for next class. The first 3 pages. If there are no more questions.
Professor, I have a
Yes.
question. I see that you open in Blackboard a response for what's the name? The one that we were reading right now?
Everyday use.
Everyday use. I was looking for the questions. I don't see the questions to make the response.
Oh, it was just like, say what the significance of what does a quilt symbolize in the story?
You said verbally last on Monday.
Yeah, I think.
Or because most of the time you send us email, so and I was followed by the emails. Even though I took a handwriter, but I thought that you're gonna send the emails, and I was waiting for that question. I'm waiting for that question. That's why I didn't make my response.
Oh, well, the question's in there, in the response, in the thing I uploaded.
And Blackboard.
Yeah. So the story is there, and then beneath it says what the question is.
All right, okay, thanks.
In one paragraph, discuss what is the significance of the quilt in the story. It's in there.
All right, good. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I will hang out. People have more questions, but if you are good, I'm good. Have a good night. I'm not hungry, so you're not keeping me from dinner. I ate before the class. So I'll see you all next week. Have a good weekend.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of the week and have a nice weekend.
Professor.
Good weekend, everyone.
Speak
Bye-bye.
to you, Professor.
Thanks, Professor.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. Take care.
I don't know which story to choose out of so many. It is so, I don't know which one to go for. Any ideas?
Well, it depends which ones. I always start with one. If you liked one more than the other, that might be a good one to start.
I know, but I'm still don't know. Thank you though.
Okay.
From what you've seen, anything that sticks out that you think I did okay?
Yeah, no, you do good responses to all of them. I mean, I think, in terms of like like symbolism is a popular one. I mean, I give options to people so that, because, I have to read them all. So that's why some professors give like one prompt. That's what's going to happen with the research paper. I give 2 prompts, but, then you have to read, the same.
I know symbolism comes easy.
Yeah.
So I guess I can choose a story and write about all the symbols I find.
Mm-hmm.
That possible?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
and then and sometimes and when you think of symbolism, it's not only objects. Think of characters, right? Like a character, what a character represents, right? They could be symbolic characters. So think about that too.
Okay, perfect. Sounds great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
You're welcome.
Have a good weekend, Professor.
All right. Take care, Johnny. Any more questions? If not, then have a good night.